Welcome to Alive and Well, the podcast for the new era of high achievers. You're done burning out, and you're ready to lead, work, and live in a rhythm that honors both your brilliance and your body. I'm your host, Michelle Grosser. I'm a trial attorney turned nervous system strategist, and I've lived the burnout story. I know what it's like to chase your goals at the expense of your well-being. And I also know it doesn't have to be that way. Here, we're redefining success. It's where productivity feels peaceful, boundaries feel like freedom, and energy comes from within. Each week, I'll share practical tools for nervous system regulation, time mastery, and somatic strategies so you can show up with clarity, calm, and confidence in every part of your life. Because you, my friend, were given a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. So here's to life and living it fully. This is the path to feeling alive and well. Let's dive in. Welcome to Alive and Well. It's Michelle here. On the show today, we're going to talk about patterns that we all run. Patterns that we run subconsciously, nervous system patterns that we picked up. Guys, we picked these up when we were really young. Like, we've been running these things since childhood, so much so that a lot of these patterns, which are really nervous system adaptations, are things that we've been doing for so long that we just think it's part of our personality. Or we just think like, oh, that's just how I am, right? I'm just type A, or I'm just a perfectionist, or I'm just a people pleaser, or I'm whatever it is. And when we get curious about it and start to unravel some of this stuff and realize, oh, where does this actually come from? Like, where did this start? Why did I start doing this? Maybe I'm not just stubborn. Maybe I'm not just emotional. This is like actually something that I have taken on over time. And we're still running these patterns today. So this is actually something that I love going on a deep dive about. Like, I can nerd out about these types of patterns because it's fascinating. So what I thought we could do today is go through the 5 different, I call them capacity patterns. And then maybe you can start to see yourself and which one tends to be your primary pattern. So when you were a kid, maybe as early as birth, right? Infancy, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, when you were hitting these big developmental milestones and your nervous system was developing and something happened in your life for your little body that was so overwhelming. Maybe it felt really stressful. Maybe it just felt too intense. Maybe it felt unpredictable or scary when you were a little kid. So it could have been something really big, or it could have been something small, but your little nervous system had to figure out what to do with that, right? Like, how do I handle this? How do I manage this? How do I make this less intense or less overwhelming or less scary so I feel more safe? And your nervous system, your brilliant nervous system, adapted. So maybe you adapted by getting really quiet and just waiting for the stressful thing to pass. Maybe you adapted by outworking everybody and you were just going to show up and be better and stronger and smarter to make everything okay. Or maybe you disconnected and you kind of went somewhere else. Like, you spent a lot of time in, playing in imaginary worlds, or escaping, that kind of thing. Or maybe you even just like took over and handled it yourself. And what happened is that we just tried out all these different things when we were little. This is not something that we consciously chose, right? Our nervous system was just trying out all these different strategies to see what worked best. And then your nervous system is also like a library. So when something worked, right, it tried an approach, it tried a strategy, and that worked, right? Oh, this actually helped me feel less overwhelmed, or that helped me feel more comfortable, or it helped me feel a little safer. Your nervous system, your little library in there, filed it away. It filed it away and it was like, all right, we're going to do this again the next time that something stressful happens. And then it happened again the time after that. And then over time, what happens is that those adaptations become habits, and then those habits become patterns. And I call them capacity patterns, and we all have them. So as I've done this work and studied this work, what I see is that there are 5 different capacity patterns. All of us have a primary pattern. That's like our go-to response when we're feeling stressed or overwhelmed. And then most people tend to run a secondary pattern, and some people even run a third pattern. But there are 5 capacity patterns. So the first pattern, the earliest one to form, is called the navigator. And I call it the navigator because the stress response, if you're a navigator, right, or you tend to run the navigator pattern when you're stressed and overwhelmed, that response is you're always looking for a way out. So you move away from stress by either physically leaving. So that might look like quitting the job, or, the breakups in high school and college, the minute things got uncomfortable, or, you're just like, you feel stressed and you're like, I just got to get out of here, right? I got to go take a walk. I got to go be by myself in my room. That's the navigator pattern, moving away from stress by disconnecting. It can be physically leaving, like I just described, or it could be mentally or emotionally just checking out, right? You start to space out, you kind of dissociate, just get me out of here. That's the navigator pattern. The next pattern to form is called what I call the caretaker. And the caretaker keeps themselves good and safe and loved by making sure that everyone else's needs are met. So this is kind of like the quintessential people pleaser. Like, I can't be good until everyone else is good around me. And I'm always making sure that everyone else is happy and they're taken care of. And I help everybody and I say yes to everything. And I make sure like everything is good. And then I get whatever crumbs are left, right? So the caretaker tends to really, it's hard to do self-care because you probably tend to come last if you're a caretaker. And you're really focused on making sure that everyone else around you is good, oftentimes at your own expense. And then there's the anchor. The anchor, if you run the anchor pattern when you're stressed and overwhelmed, you are someone who just like hunkers down. So when things feel stressful, or you feel like things are unfair, or you don't think you're being treated how you should be, or you think someone else, your husband probably, or someone at work should be showing up differently or helping you more. All of these things are true and you feel them, but you just kind of like hunker down and keep going. You don't really say much. You don't cause a stir. You kind of keep yourself safe by just staying focused on being quiet and playing small, right? And just waiting it out. You're an anchor. You are just like, all your energy is just down and in. You hold everything in. And then the fourth capacity pattern is the warrior. The warrior pushes through. They take control. They never show weakness. So that usually originated, again, in childhood, like all of these patterns. But if you tend to run the warrior pattern when you're stressed and overwhelmed, I would venture to guess that somewhere in your childhood, and again, this could be a big, like life-changing event, or it could be something small that just felt really overwhelming for your particular nervous system. But somewhere along the way, your parents or caregivers, the ones that you were supposed to be able to rely on to keep you safe and be around and meet your needs, couldn't or didn't for whatever reason, right? Someone dropped the ball and you felt like, and again, this is all subconscious, right? I can't really trust anyone else. I can't rely on anyone else. No one else is really dependable. I only got me, right? I can only rely on myself to take care of myself and get things done. So you take control and you don't show weakness and you get things done because that's the only way you can trust that they'll get done. And then the last pattern to form, or the last capacity pattern, is the architect. And the architect is a stress pattern where safety is found in structure. Safety is found in order. Safety is found in, if I just do things the right way, the way things are supposed to be done, then everything's going to be okay. That's the architecture, right? Very structured, very orderly. Full disclosure, I run the architect as my primary pattern. And what I thought would be interesting and like really helpful, I think, for everyone today is I want to go through what that has looked like for me across 5 different areas where I believe we can all expand our capacity. So I'm going to talk about what low capacity looked like for me in those areas as an architect, and what it looks like now as I've learned how to increase my capacity. And then for each one, I want to give you a quick little glimpse of what it might look like in the 4 other patterns too. Because if you run a pattern other than the architect, I want you to be able to kind of start to see yourself and the patterns in which you run in these 5 areas. Okay. All right, let's get into it. The first capacity area that I believe we all have room to grow in is emotional capacity. Let me actually go through those areas first, and then we'll run through them. So we're going to talk about what it looks like in emotional capacity, stress capacity, our ability to manage stress and cognitive load, physical and energetic capacity. That's the third one, in your body, your energy, your physical body. Relational capacity. This is our capacity to be in relationship with other human beings and their stuff and their needs and their emotions and conflict and like all of those things. And then finally, my favorite, our joy and pleasure capacity, right? How can we increase our ability to experience all of the good that's in our lives and not let it just be like these fleeting moments that are here and then they're gone? How do we actually sit in the goodness and let it do something to our minds and our bodies, something good? But let's go back to emotional capacity. So as someone who runs the architect's pattern, when I'm feeling uncomfortable or stressed or frustrated or overwhelmed, right? When I'm dysregulated, this is the pattern I go into. The architect has this like unconscious filter running all the time, especially on emotions. And this was so true for me. I didn't even know this until I started doing this work. I was completely oblivious to this. But I was running everything through a filter subconsciously. I didn't know I was doing this. I was running everything through a filter of what was appropriate, what emotions were appropriate, ever, or even just in a particular circumstance. So what emotions I thought were weak or strong or good or bad or positive or negative, right? Everything was running through that filter. Every thought, every behavior, the things other people did, I was running through my own filter of what I thought was good or bad or right or wrong or what have you. Which means that I didn't intend to be like this or do this, but it also meant that I was quite critical because in my mind, everything had a category and it was either like, you're doing that right, or, oh my gosh, you're doing that so wrong. And I was judging everything and everyone, myself included. So when it comes to emotional capacity, before I had this revelation and started doing this work myself, all of my emotions passed through this filter, right? So joy, gratitude, focus, like productivity adjacent feelings, determination, discipline, those kinds of things to me were like acceptable, right? Those things got to like be experienced, but other emotions didn't get to see the light of day. Grief, anger, disappointment, frustration, fear. Those things were always like flagged by my body as, well, that's not appropriate, right? It's not appropriate to be angry. You're crazy. It's not appropriate to be fearful of that. You're focusing on the negative and you're living in fear. Be courageous, be strong, be bold, right? It's not appropriate to be disappointed in how this thing turned out. You're just like wallowing in self-pity. You better pick yourself up by your bootstraps and, keep on going and put a smile on your face while you're at it. All subconscious. I didn't know I was thinking like this. It didn't feel safe to feel the full range, the full spectrum of human emotion. It was so much better for me as an architect to understand my emotions intellectually. Why do I feel this way? What's the connection? Like, oh, this makes sense. This was caused by this, to understand everything intellectually and then just move on. And again, I didn't know I was doing this, right? And that's the thing about patterns, is that they're automatic until we have the revelation and they come to light. We're not always choosing them. They're just running. And for me, where I still look back and this like hits me like a ton of bricks, and I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but I'm finding the courage to talk about it more. It's still like a really, I don't know if it's a sore spot is the right word, but it still hurts. I've had 5 miscarriages. I had 2 before my first daughter, and then I had my second daughter right after. They're 16 months apart. And then since Ashton's been born in the last 7 years, I've had 3 more miscarriages. One of which, the first of which, this was at the beginning of the pandemic, I had a ruptured ectopic pregnancy, which means that the embryo implanted inside of my fallopian tubes and started growing there until it ruptured my fallopian tube. And, maybe one day I'll go into that a little more, but I was in quite a bit of pain, like a lot of pain, for a few hours. And again, in my architect pattern at this point, I just like laid in bed with a heating pad, even though that's what was going on in my body. I was like bleeding out. And I pushed through, and, the next, I ended up, I remember being in bed with so much pain, and just having like a heating pad on me and being like, wow, this is the most painful period I've ever had. Lo and behold, I had no idea that I was experiencing a ruptured ectopic pregnancy. When my period never came, I took a pregnancy test. It was positive. It's like weeks later, you guys. It's like, this is a miracle. Went to see my OB, and they ran an ultrasound and walked me across the street from their clinic to the hospital, South Miami Hospital, where I had emergency surgery, and they had to remove that fallopian tube. No one could explain how I was still alive. No one could explain how I had only experienced pain, like intense pain, for a few hours. And after that, I was going on with life for like 2 or 3 weeks, I think, before I went to see the doctor. So part of that is a story for another day. But I say all that to say, in those moments, right, of loss, and if you've experienced loss and grief, and, whether it's infertility or miscarriage or otherwise, I look back and I can see how quickly I was to move to the reframe. So I bypassed all of the pain, all of the grief, all of the sadness, all of the disappointment, all of the shame, and I went straight to like, well, everything happens for a reason, right? God's timing is perfect. Well, I should be so grateful that I have 2 healthy children. And all of those things are true. I believe them. But man, I reached for them too fast, faster than I should have, because sitting in the grief, like the actual grief in my body, without immediately like spiritually bypassing it, that was really hard for me. It's still hard for me, to be honest. I'm working on it, but that architect in me wants to just like, go around all of that messiness over there and like just get to the part that feels appropriate, the silver lining, before I'm feeling much of anything, right? On another side, like anger for me wasn't an appropriate emotion. That looked instead like being annoyed or irritable or edgy or critical. I had a really short fuse with my poor husband during this time. And I just had these standards that other people kept failing to meet. And I didn't know why or where, how that, like, why was that such a thing with me? Was it just that I have high standards, that I like exceptional work, and I expect people to be and show up excellently? Partly, but I think it was more than that, right? And I know that now. And because it was mostly my husband, let's just be honest, we've been together for 20 years now, right? We're coming up on 17 years of marriage. Like I'm talking like 10, 12, 15 years ago. By the grace of God, our marriage is so much better than it was then. But man, I held so much resentment. And that resentment just built quietly because I was filtering all the anger, suppressing it, and then it was just leaking out sideways instead, neither of which were healthy, right? But expanded emotional capacity for me now looks like actually having the courage and the skills and the tools, frankly, to feel and process emotions, especially the uncomfortable ones, before bypassing all of it and going straight to the reframe. So I can now let myself like experience some of the waves of these emotions before I start trying to understand it, narrate it, intellectualize it. I can actually cry when I'm sad, which is something that was really impossible for me, frankly, 10, 15 years ago. I could explain my sadness, but I couldn't feel it, right? And it's still a practice. And some days and some seasons, I'm still so much better at it than others. And that's okay. So that's my experience of that as an architect, right? If you tend to run the navigator pattern, remember that's the one that's like I got to get out of here, right? You might experience low emotional capacity where anytime anything feels too intense or you're overwhelmed or uncomfortable, you just like feel, one, you either physically leave, or two, you just kind of dissociate and you're like floating above everything, right? You're not experiencing it or feeling it. You're just like on the outside looking in. You're aware that something's happening, but you can't actually like land in it and be in it. For the caretaker, that's your primary pattern. Emotional capacity might look like you take on everyone else's feelings, right? If your husband's in a bad mood, you're in a bad mood. If your kids are sad, you're really sad. If someone at work is upset or disappointed in you, or however that comes out, you're like so wrecked about it. Everyone else's emotions has such an intensity in your experience, but you're quite disconnected from your own, right? So the things that make you frustrated or sad or grieved or angry just get like pushed to the side because that's not important, right? You're so worried about how everyone else is feeling and doing. For the anger, it might look like a lot of just numbness, right? You just like bury those emotions so deep that they've stopped being accessible because you just hunker down and push through, right? You're going to just ride it out. And then for the warrior, anger tends to come through quite easily, quite quickly, right? But vulnerability is really hard to access. Fear is really hard to access, right? You might be even in denial of things that you're actually fearful of because that's way too vulnerable. Sadness, grief, disappointment, all of those things kind of get armored over completely because that's way too much vulnerability if you run the warrior pattern. Curious about which of these tend to feel true for you as it relates to emotional capacity. All right, let's jump into stress capacity. This is really how I ended up in burnout multiple times. The architect finds safety in doing things the best, right? So it's like everything has to be done correctly. Everything has to be done completely, which means the bar is always annoyingly impossibly high. And there's always more to do before I could rest, right? So, I mean, you guys know a little bit about my story, but I was running a law firm, 2 babies under 2, and I had always been the strong one, right? It's just the role I took on even growing up. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. A lot of stuff in childhood where I just became like the one who just handles it, right? I'm the strong one. I don't ask for help. I push through even when my body is like screaming at me to slow down and stop. I work late. I get up early. I treated at this point, this time I'm talking about, every cue from my body, whether it was tension, gut issues, fatigue, headaches, skin issues, hair issues, like exhaustion, anxiety even that started to creep in, insomnia. I went through years of insomnia. All of that to me in a season of my life before I started doing this work was an inconvenience. Like that was so annoying to me and was such a waste of time. And it was another thing that I just had to manage rather than really wise communication from my body and something that I should have been paying attention to and acting on. And the architect, that pattern, when it popped up, convinced me that rest had to be earned, right? So yeah, sure, I can sit on the couch on Sunday afternoon and read a book or play with my kids, but I could only do that once all my work was done, right? Once the house was clean and the meal plan had been done and the groceries had been ordered and my work was done for the week and my email was at inbox 0 and like whatever. And if any of you run this pattern, that's a mountain with no peak. It's never the point where everything's done. So I never stopped until my body stepped in and was like, nope, tapping out, right? We're done here. Burnout for me wasn't dramatic. Like it didn't announce itself. It was a slow accumulation of all of these ignored signals until my system finally, just shut it down. And then I was lying in bed, unable to do any of the things that used to come really easily for me, miserable and wondering how I got here. And I had gotten there by overriding every warning sign for years. Expanding my stress capacity looks so different now. I'm actually managing. I talked about this in my email last week, but my life is actually much more full. if you looked at it, just like looking at my calendar and what responsibilities I have now, right? Obviously I still have 2 kids, but I'm homeschooling them now. I'm running this business and the podcast and the coaching. And then I'm also running a pool cleaning business with a team and a staff and hundreds of customers. So there's a lot on my plate. But I've expanded my stress capacity so I can catch the signals my body is sending so much earlier before I'm at like 90% capped out. And I can respond to them and I can allow myself to rest, not just in like taking a nap, but there's 7 types of rest, right? In a way that I don't feel like I have to earn it. So that's how it showed up for me. For the navigator, again, this is the lever. Stress often shows up as disappearing. So you're feeling stressed, you're spacing out, you're procrastinating, you're losing hours, you're struggling to stay present. If you run the caretaker pattern, you're probably saying yes to everything. You're so overextended, right? You're saying yes to all the things when you're already empty or you're done. For the anchor, stress gets absorbed. Everything gets absorbed for the anchor, right? It gets absorbed quietly and you just kind of endure. Again, I just got to wait it out, right? It's going to get better in 7 years, whatever it is. Rather than addressing it, right? And you just wait it out until your body probably gives out like mine did. And then for the warrior, it looks like doubling down. So it's like, I'm just going to push harder, more control. I'm going to sleep when I'm dead kind of energy. Okay, let's move on. Physical and energetic capacity. So, I just kind of told you this story and I'll keep it brief here, but low energetic capacity in my body, I was just dragging through the day instead of living. I had high cortisol levels. My hormones were a wreck. Adrenal failure, no restorative rest. My joints ached, my hair's falling out. My gut was a mess. Mood swings, like you name it, all the classic burnout presentation. What's different now? My body, one, is not just like a means to an end, right? It's not just a machine that I'm overriding. It's a resource. It's part of who I am. And I actually notice and honor when I'm tired, physically and also like mentally and emotionally, right? And I can respond to it. And I know that sounds basic. Oh no, it is what it is. It took me a long time to learn this, you guys. Relational capacity. We'll spend some time here and we'll spend some time in joy and pleasure before we wrap up. Relational capacity. This is probably the one, it's not that I'm most embarrassed about it, but looking back, I'm like, man, I missed it. I missed it. Know better, do better. Okay. 1, 2, 3 over it. The architect has standards. I had very high standards. I could spot a typo or a spelling error from a mile away, and I was so proud of myself for doing it. This sounds I sound crazy. I was super detailed. I was specific. I communicated really well, right? And obviously going through law school and, there's a lot of training and being a technical writer, and I excelled in that. It was like the one class that I booked in law school was like civil procedure, because I was so detailed in learning all the rules of procedure. Anyhow, often unspoken standards for how things should be done. This was so true for me. And I didn't even realize this. Where this really came to be for me was when I had kids. Because when people didn't meet my standards that I wasn't even really so aware that I had, or at least they certainly were not expressed or communicated, when people did not meet the standards when they were, in my eyes, wrong, just not doing it right, I lost it. And it didn't look like me being angry, right? Because remember, everything ran through a filter. But there was just like this simmering inside of me, and then eventually it would pop off. And I think back to when Jeff and I had Amory, our first daughter. She's 9 now. I had a complete picture in my head of what a good dad would look like, right? I'm the oldest of 5 kids. So now looking back now, I have this understanding, but my dad was a really hands-on dad, right? He changed diapers and fed everyone, and like he was just super involved. But I'm the oldest. So I have no idea how he was with me, his firstborn, when he had to learn all of this. I probably don't remember, my 2 brothers who come after me were 2 years and 3 years apart, because I was so little. What I remember is when he took care of us when I was like 10, 12, which means he had, 10, 12 years experience at that point being a dad. But when we brought home our first daughter, I thought that Jeff was just going to be like what I knew my dad to be. I thought he would just intuitively know like how to bathe a newborn and change a diaper and like read her cues and hold her and take care of her. And like nobody gave me this picture, but I had assembled it from somewhere without realizing it. And it was like, I had this very clear picture of what dads of newborns do. And poor Jeff is the youngest. No like cousins or family or like there was no babies in his life growing up, right? He wasn't the kind of guy who was like babysitting when he was older. So he had no idea. And he certainly had no idea of what I expected of him because I didn't even know, frankly. And I certainly didn't ever share that with him. So he was learning in real time, this poor guy. Same as me. But of course I was much more critical of him. And I wasn't extending him the same grace that I maybe was extending myself. And I just remember like trying to watch him probably, swaddle Amory like the first time and just like feeling these flashes of impatience. Like, are you kidding me? Like, no, that's not how you do it. Here, just give it to me. And I would take over. Right. And then he would step back. And over time, without either of us fully understanding why, like I was just doing everything. And then of course I was feeling resentful for it. And that wasn't fair, right? He was failing a test that he didn't even know he was taking. He was being measured against a standard that I'd never said out loud. And that wasn't a partnership, right? That was my architect running my marriage. Expanded relational capacity as I've grown in this. Sometimes it looks like saying my standards out loud, but even better than that, it's actually examining whether those standards, like where did that even come from, right? Is this actually true? Is this necessary? Is this actually the best way? Or have I just convinced myself that because it's how I do it, it's the right way, right? Is there another way? And a lot of times it looks like me just biting my tongue and creating some space and letting Jeff do it his way, even if his way isn't my way. And that's okay. God gave my kids two parents for a reason, right? There's things that he actually does a lot better than I do, but I've had to like allow myself to allow him to explore that and grow those skills. And he's an awesome dad. In my marriage, it looks like where, I can actually show up as a partner instead of just like managing everyone and everything. So that was my experience as the architect in early parenthood. For the navigator, low relational capacity often looks like being physically present, like you're there, but emotionally you're checked out. Emotionally, you're somewhere else. For the caretaker, if that's your pattern when you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, it might look like giving everything to everyone always, and then you have nothing left for the actual relationship itself, right? Maybe for the anchor, it's just staying quiet. Even when you have something to say, right? You have opinions. If you're honest with yourself, you have thoughts, you have ideas, you have, something you'd like to say about things that you think are jacked up or unfair or unkind, and you just keep it in, right? You endure instead of connecting. Conflict does require connection, or connection requires conflict rather, and you just avoid it altogether. And for the warrior, a lot of times relationally, what feels safest is just keeping people at arm's length. So when you are being the capable one and the self-sufficient one and the strong one, and you never let anyone get close enough to actually like need them and have a reciprocity in the relationship, that's low relational capacity for that pattern, for the warrior pattern. All right. And then finally, joy and pleasure capacity. In the last episode last week, I told the story about how my family, we lived in Miami at the time, and we had driven across the state to, I don't know, Naples or somewhere on the Gulf Coast of Florida. And this is maybe 7-8 years ago, for a perfect vacation. Like, my kids are healthy. My husband's there. Every prayer answered, right in front of me, watching my family play. And I mean, this is pretty scary, but like all of that happening in front of my eyes and feeling not much at all, feeling kind of flat, feeling kind of disconnected, wishing I could just like get up and be in the joy and the fun and like everything that they were having. But it's really hard when the architect is in pattern. It's really hard for joy to fully land because one, joy is vulnerable, right? Could be taken away at any moment. That feels scary. But more so, it's almost like I was so in my head, right? I was watching, I was thinking, what's left to be done? What do I have to plan for later today? What does everybody need? And there's also this idea that like pleasure had to be earned. And if my to-do list wasn't done, if it wasn't ever actually finished, I was more concerned with like, does everyone have sunscreen on? Right. And like, am I seeing everybody and no one's head is under the water? Then just like giving myself permission to actually enjoy the moment. Right. And, looking back now, I have so much of a better understanding of what was going on in my nervous system that day on the beach, like what the architect's pattern built for me to do so. I was scanning for what was incomplete. I was seeing what needed to be managed. I was trying to anticipate what might go wrong. And safety wasn't in the present moment. Safety was in making sure that I had everything handled. But expanding my joy capacity, I choose a word of the year every year. 3-4 years ago, my word of the year was joy. Oh my gosh, that was a gift. What a gift I gave myself. But it was really like allowing myself to experience the good things and get out of my head and feel all the goodness in my body, right? Feel the moment I'm actually in, having small things landing, right? Like just sitting. You guys should see me with my cup of coffee in the morning. Like I revel in that thing. The house is quiet and the fireplace is on. And, I'm just like, able to hear myself think. Like it's so good, right? My kids cracking me up. Spontaneity, lightheartedness, joy, fun, just like playfulness that doesn't immediately trigger this like whole logistics thing in my mind. That was my experience as an architect. If you tend to run the navigator pattern, low joy capacity might look like being in really good moments, but kind of, again, being removed and kind of feeling like you're on the outside looking in, watching them from a distance, present in your body, but not actually in the experience. For the caretaker, it's probably performing joy a lot, right? And doing it for the sake of everyone else being happy as they watch you happy, but not actually feeling it yourself. For the anchor, joy probably feels like a threat, right? And I kind of mentioned that earlier for me. Joy can feel really scary and vulnerable because it can be taken away. And if it's taken away, that would hurt even more, right? And then for the warrior, a lot of times joy and playfulness and silliness and like all of that stuff can, again, this is subconscious, can feel like a weakness because there's stuff to be done, right? I have to be like on my game. And I don't have time for that. So I tell you all of this, one, because I want you to see that when I'm talking about capacity and capacity patterns and expanding our capacity, this isn't like some abstract ideal. Like this is real. It shows up in your marriage. It shows up in your body. It shows up in how you lead, right? The way you show up in the workspace. It shows up in the ways you deal with conflict, in your confidence, in your like all of the ways you see the world and yourself in it. And whether you cried at your miscarriage or talked yourself out of it before the tears could come, right? Like that was true for me. The reason it looks different for each of us isn't random. It's just patterned. Your nervous system, just like mine, has been running a specific strategy since you were a really small kid. And until you start to understand what that strategy is, you're trying to change the symptoms without addressing the source. And I'm really excited. I'm really close to releasing it. It's almost done, but I have been working really hard on creating a quiz for you guys. I'm calling it capacity pattern quiz. What's your capacity pattern? But I think it's going to come out next week. It's almost ready. It's a really short quiz. I think it'll take you 2 or 3 minutes to do it. And it's going to help you identify your primary capacity pattern. So maybe you're an architect like me. Maybe you're a navigator, or you're a caretaker, or you're an anchor, or you're a warrior. And maybe as you were listening today, you're already like, I think I'm this as my primary pattern, and I might be that as my secondary pattern. But you're going to go take the quiz. You're going to get your result. And I have a really great like quiz result landing page that I built for you guys that you can read all about your result. And then even more, I have created a free private podcast. I'm calling it the Capacity Code. So after you take the quiz, after you read a little bit about your pattern and start to learn, you you listen to this private podcast called The Capacity Code, where I have a dedicated 25-ish minute episode for each of the 5 capacity patterns. And then we get into the nitty gritty, like where'd this thing come from, right? How is it showing up in your life right now? In a little bit more detail, what expanding capacity actually looks like for your specific patterns. And it's free. It's my gift to you. I'm so excited about it. It's specific to you. I think it's going to be really helpful. I think it's going to be super practical and also really clarifying, bringing light to like a lot of the reasons why you do the things you do. Probably things that frustrate you, like, man, why do I do that again, right? Why do I say that again? Why do I always kind of fall into this when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed or annoyed or what have you? And this is going to be so helpful. So that's coming. Stay tuned. And where this is all leading is that in, I think I'm going to do it over the summer, but launching the first cohort of my brand new signature program called the Capacity Method. So I'm currently building that out, but if you're curious about being a part of it, if this is something that like work that resonates for you and you want to learn how to expand your capacity, expand the resilience of your nervous system to handle life without getting so dysregulated, this is for you. There's a wait list that I created and it's open. So you can give me just your name and your email, and that way I'll reach out to you with more information as that launch approaches, and you'll be the first to hear about it, access to early registration, but more so you'll have access to bonuses and savings when that comes about. So that link is in the show notes right now. So if this is work that, again, is interesting to you or you're curious, go ahead, put your name on that wait list, and you'll be on the list of the first ones who get information when we're getting closer to launching it. All right. I'm believing this was helpful. At least interesting, right? Maybe piquing some curiosity. Stay tuned for the capacity pattern quiz coming probably next week. Thanks so much for being here. I love y'all so much. I'll talk to you soon.
If you love Mommy's Podcast, leave a review.
Thanks for listening to Alive and Well. If today's episode resonated, would you do me a favor? Take 30 seconds and leave a 5-star rating and short review. It really helps to get this show out to other people just like you who could also use the information in this podcast. And if you're ready to take the next step in regulating your nervous system, download my free Nervous System Reset Guide. It's linked right in the show notes. Inside, you'll find simple, body-based practices to help you feel more clear, calm, and connected starting today. Make sure you're following the show so you don't miss out on what's coming next, because you were made to thrive. Fully alive, fully present, and fully well. I'll see you soon.